Hey everyone! There have been some big minecart changes that have come to the newest snapshot, and I wanted to give you all a rundown of what the changes are and what my opinion is. It's been a minute since I've made a video, so without further ado, let's get right into it. First thing is some very exciting bug fixes that have come to the game. I've been asking for these for a while. For those of you who have seen my "What updates do carts need" video, you may recognize some of this. So there is the rotation bug, where previously, if you placed carts next to each other, they would give each other motion in the north-south direction and start moving along the rail whenever you place them, and in the other direction nothing would happen, which created some directional placement issues and design annoyances. So now that has been resolved. There's also now a game rule for changing the cart speed. It goes up to 1,000 blocks per second, and I can show that here. So if I nudge this cart, you see that it accelerates quite quickly. And one thing you might also notice is that the cart is not flying off the rails. The reason for this is because they also fixed the derailing bug, which is another thing that I mentioned in my updates suggestion video. So, um, already off to a pretty strong start in the update. On to the next bug fix, there have been some interpolation improvements. So previously, minecarts were outlandish in how far behind the minecart would show you where it is. But now, as you can see, you actually see the cart jumping, which is accurate to its position server side. And this is really, really exciting for me, because what that means is the biggest barrier for entry for people getting into minecart tech is now gone. Um, and I can also show another example here where before, with the previous interpolation, you would kind of get a visual bug where the cart clips down and then goes under here, even though actually the cart is up here, and it just was very unintuitive and understandably hard to work with, because you're not really seeing where the card is and you're having to work with it effectively blind. So I'm very, very happy to see that this has been changed as well. So, some very good bug fixes already. They also added cart jumping, where you have the cart jump and maintain its motion as it goes in the horizontal and vertical axes as it goes off of sloped rails. And so it you end up with these this cool jumping animation and behavior. And I gotta say, for this alone, I actually quite like it. It's really fun. It's flavorful. I've seen a lot of stuff on Reddit and Discord of people coming up with really cool and silly designs. So overall, it looks like this is a very positive feature that has been added. But there are some drawbacks to the way it's been implemented that I hope in future snapshots can be worked out. So some of those drawbacks include kind of unintuitive behavior, where you might expect it to go through all three of these, or perhaps not at all with the way that it used to work before. But unfortunately, neither of those are correct. The middle one works because of the way that it accelerates, and the tick by tick position ends up stopping it at the cart and then reversing it, similar to how it used to work. And then for these, it just flies through the wall, which is kind of fun. But um, unfortunately, it doesn't really make much sense. So I'm hoping that that can get fixed, um, so that it's a little more intuitive, or at least make it more consistent for any rail distance. One of the two would be preferable. However, this jumping behavior does result in some really interesting tech. So here are some elevators that I ended up making, where the water is just to make it accelerate upwards a little bit faster. And here's a smaller one as well, or a more compact one. And these are fairly interesting. I really like these elevators, and it kind of makes up for the fact that mangrove root elevators no longer work. I can show that real quick. So before, if you waterlogged these rails, or these mangrove roots rather, you would be able to have the cart go all the way up, as I showed in my waterlogged cartstone video. But unfortunately, now that does not work, and I can show exactly why over here. So now the cart clips through 2 blocks, whereas before it would stop on this one. And here's another rail configuration where before the cart would be able to go all the way through, but now it's not able to. And that's unfortunate. Sometimes it used to need more speed, but it doesn't matter how much speed you give it anymore, it's not going to make it across. And so that kind of creates some problems with how much you can control a cart when it's on a sloped rail. Um, I'm not sure if I like that, because that breaks things like, back here I have an unstacker, and if I put some carts into this unstacker, one will go out and the carts are stopped right now, but as soon as I hit this, these carts are going to fly out, and there's not a good way to control the carts when they're on sloped rails now, and that's a bit problematic. Um, Here's a funny little staircase for getting the cart up, where it goes through the wall, and unfortunately, it doesn't go backwards because of the same issue here. Um, Perhaps, maybe if they can fix that, you may end up with a way it can go both ways, or I'm not sure. But some other weird unintended behavior it leads to is, if you haven't seen this before, this just launches the cart up. um, yeah. So, uh, yeah, it just goes up a few hundred blocks in the air like that. So, whee. Yeah. So some weird changes with the sloped mechanics. Um, and overall, I think that there are some positives, and I think that there are also some things that need to be improved upon or tweaked a little bit for it to make it more workable, not just for tech, but I think this also applies to casuals as well, because some of this, the way it behaves, just doesn't really make sense right now, and I think that just needs to be improved. So, and that would come with more control. Moving on to the next thing that got changed, you can no longer manually place stacks of carts. So you see, there's still only one cart. So I could place the first cart, but it's only one. And same goes with dispensers. You can no longer dispense stacks of carts directly onto one rail. Um, and this is a big problem for storage tech. There are lots of contraptions that rely on being able to place place hopper carts on top of each other with a dispenser automatically. Um, and there isn't really a good alternative within a confined amount of space. Uh, yes, you could technically do something similar to this, where you create a stack, but this is not a good option whatsoever. Um, it, it's not space efficient and it's not fast. More importantly, so it really, really nerfs a lot of storage tech that relies on stacking hopper carts to unload shulker boxes, which ends up being actually a fair bit of the more recent encoded tech that's being developed. So this is a pretty unfortunate change. Um, I think maybe there could be some ways to make this interesting if it didn't also dispense the cart. So if Mojang is listening, if you are dead set and not going to revert it, which I would recommend, the other recommendation I would have is to make it fail to dispense. So at least that way it allows for some interesting tech with using redstone externally to see if there's a cart on the rail line. But other than that, I would much rather be reverted because it really does not offer any good alternative for stacking hopper mine carts within a machine. Thankfully, they did not break uh, stacked carts too heavily. You saw it kind of explode there, so they do behave a little bit differently because of the movement changes, which I will talk about here in a second. But overall, they behave in some similar ways, but not exactly the same either. So they at least move around a bit, but they're also more finicky and more likely to explode. Things like budget bolts no longer work. So this just, yeah, as you can see, this is not working at all. Even with the stack, they are not propelling each other, and it is just not happening. So that's rather unfortunate. Part of the reason for that break is because of the way that they changed the movement for carts, as well as the change in alignment on rails. And this is probably the biggest change and probably the most important change to fix as of the most recent snapshot. Um, this breaks everything. What ends up happening is if I place a cart on a curved rail, before it would have an offset, and that could go inside of blocks and it would clip and do whatever the cart desired. But now, even if I have an offset with the fence gate, it doesn't matter. It's going to align to the center of the block, and you can see how, especially with the powered rail, like whenever I exemplify it here, this doesn't really make sense as a change. I, my intuition, and of course, I understand that I work with carts a lot, so I am a bit biased when I say this, but I feel like this goes for a lot of people. Most people would expect this to have a bit of an offset. And because this offset doesn't exist anymore, everything breaks. Piston bolts no longer work. They no longer push the cart because the cart is not inside the piston. And even if I nudge the cart forward a little bit, they don't initiate the cart to snap. So it's not actually snapping into the onto the curved rail without moving by itself. So if I give it a little motion, there's a secondary change where carts do not clip inside of blocks anymore. And so, with both of those happening, now piston bolts are broken. Now, cart yeeting is broken. So, this no longer works. Soul sand yeeting, I don't have that displayed here. but that is also broken because of the or sorry, the sloped rail changes. So as of right now, there is not a for this new snapshot a known way to have a reliable cart eater. That may change in the future, but based on the way that these mechanics work, it seems like it will be quite hard to make something operable, and that's very unfortunate. And realistically, it's highly problematic because everything prior is now broken because of this alignment change specifically. And in addition, the movement changes as it collides onto this block and the way that it handles collisions. This doesn't necessarily break as many things and it's not as problematic, but when combined with the alignment issue, breaks basically everything. My recommendation would be to revert the alignment so that it aligns the way that it used to um, onto the curved rail, at least initially. As for the details of some of the more edge cases, um, I'm more open to interpretation. I personally would like to have it as it was before, but I also understand that the way curved rails and snapping worked before was also not very intuitive for some things. So um, it's I've seen the idea thrown around that perhaps it requires some other type of initial alignment setup. But regardless, it needs to change so that the alignment can work within the pistons or in cauldrons or any blocks, because without that, cart tech is not in a good place right now. And I really hope that this particular change is not permanent. Um, and as for keeping this one, for the to explain it in a little bit more depth, the cart when it hits the curved rail kind of collides against the block now rather than clipping into the block like it did before. So and just moving kind of in between. So it doesn't want to take that path anymore. And this could have pros and cons. I think there's probably some interesting tech that could come from this. So I think as long as the alignment is changed, this is probably all right to stay, or will end up not being as problematic because the actual movement of the minecart is virtually identical. And so I don't really have that much of an opinion on whether this is good or bad compared to the other part of this problem. So, final thoughts, further suggestions. Um, it seems like overall, I'm very optimistic about this update. There are some things that need improvement, but that's to be expected with a new update that's this big and has so many changes and additions and that kind of thing. I'm very optimistic about how they're approaching trying to make carts more intuitive and more fun. And that's my goal for this channel, for you guys, for cart tech in general. And so I think in terms of that, it's definitely on the right track. And for it to be on the right track is a huge first step, and I that makes me very optimistic. Um, in future snapshots, uh, I would like to see something that I mentioned in my update suggestion video. Copper rails would be something that is probably now possible since there is the cart speed change and the derail fix. Those are pretty much the two things that you need in order to add a new, faster rail type. And that would fix the issue of having forcing technical players to use piston bolts for long term or for long distance travel, but that just to clarify, would not mean that piston bolts would be obsolete, because piston bolts are still quite useful in storage tech and other um, movement of the player where you need to have fine control, which may be more difficult and probably should be more difficult with a faster rail type. So, those are all of my thoughts on the new update. I hope you guys enjoy all of the new features, and let me know in the comments below what you think. And if you have any other suggestions, feel free to join the Carchives Discord server. And a massive thanks to MBD for doing digging along with some other people in TMC who were helping with data analysis and things of that nature. So, huge thanks to everybody. This is a group effort, and I thank you all for watching.